Well, I think it's time to strategize for employee engagement and how. A very good afternoon to and a warm welcome to all of you. I'm Naz. I am the People and Culture Specialist with Team Xoxoday, and I take care of employee engagement, and I am the moderator of today's session. We have expert panelists who are going to share their views and some interesting insights on the topic, employee engagement for the new normal from the L&D perspective. We'll begin with understanding what employee engagement is and how it has evolved over the time, what an engaged employee looks like, the critical role of how learning and development is elevating in the employee engagement area. And finally, we'll be speaking on uncovering the ways for organizations to engage the employees through the L&D strategy in 2021 and beyond. And quick housekeeping things that we'll be taking care of before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop your message or put it on the chat window. We'll bring them up towards the end of the session. We have a 10-minute of Q&A, and we'll be addressing those questions there. And then, yes. So the webinar is brought to you by Upside LMS and Xoxoday. Speaking about Xoxoday, Xoxoday is a SaaS commerce company that offers business solutions and software products to HRs, channel partners, and marketers across 700 plus global companies, mainly to engage their employees and channel partners. Their products, Impulse, Compass, and Plum, are plug in and play and highly scalable. They're very easy to use, and it helps achieve the tangible business solutions. And about Upside LMS, they're a leading learn tech provider of an AI-powered learning management system and a comprehensive off-the-shelf content library they have that's called the Plethora. It is backed by over 16 years of experience, and they've had 50 plus awards and recognition, and over 2.5 million happy users worldwide. So that was about Xoxoday and Upside Elements. Now we have, before I speak a lot, let me go ahead with our speakers. So we have today among our speakers, we have Mugdha. She's the HR head of Upside Elements. She comes with a rich experience over 6 years. And she's she's a people's person and a firm believer of gender equality. Welcome, Mugdha. Yes. Next, we have Pranjalee, and she's the AVP Marketing from Upside Elements. She carries over 13 years of marketing experience, and then she's a neuromarketer. And yes, I think we all believe in keeping employees engaged. And welcome, Pranjalee. Next, we have Raajit. Raajit is our product manager from Team Xoxoday, and he is an IIM Ahmedabad alumni, and he'll be one of our speakers today, speaking about employee engagement and way about. Welcome, Raajit.
Thank you, Ms.
Yeah. So I think I won't take much time, and I will just hand it over to Pranjalee. She'll be opening the session.
Thank you so much, Naz, for the introduction, and good afternoon, good morning to all of you who are joining from different parts of the world. It's such a pleasure to be here. So I want to start this topic by having you take this quick kind of a flashback to your first interaction with your current company. Please note, I said first interaction, and I did not say your first day of joining, because that's how far employee engagement goes in the entire life cycle of a company. So for some of you, I'm sure it could date back years. You know, it could be in the pre-COVID times where everything was normal, as we would like to call it now, in a very physical kind of a setting. Maybe you went to your office, you met your HR, did some documentation, and that's how the process happened. And for some of you who would have joined in the recent past, maybe as recent as a month or even in the last 1 year, it would have been a very virtual experience. In one way or the other, this is your first interaction of employee engagement that set the tone for what you would expect of you as an employee and from your employer who was there to help you along the way. So I want to start by laying the foundation for this conversation by starting with the very, very basics. And the first thing we need to understand is what is employee engagement? And here's a beautiful quote that I think summarizes employee engagement. Now, there are a few fancy words in there. So something like investment, like privilege of staying in business, and you get a sense of how important it is for your business strategy, for overall business sustenance. Unfortunately, it does little to kind of simplify the term and help us understand what it is. So what I would like to do is I want to decipher these terms by breaking it into two different entities, employee and engagement. So let's see what employee really means. An employee is a person who is employed by an organization or business for some work, and in exchange of which you get your wages or your salary. So I am an employee of Upside LMS. I'm sure you are an employee of some organization, or maybe you're an employer who has employees as a part of your organization. Engagement, on the other hand, is, I believe, where the juice lies, and that's going to be the agenda of our conversation for the next 40 odd minutes. Now, I want to tell this personal kind of anecdote, right? So in our personal lives, when we get engaged or we have an engagement, it's an official announcement to the world, telling about our intention to marry this one person. It's like a commitment that we make not just to ourselves, but to our partner, saying that I have chosen you amongst the others. And for most of us who cross the bridge, well, I certainly have, we know that no amount of being engaged actually gets the other person, your better half, to change for you or even love you more, right? And so this is where I want to get into a quick poll. Someone, if you can just launch the poll for me. Okay, sorry, yeah, here's the poll. Right, on your screen, you will have a question with two different options. Right, and the reason we are doing this poll is because I really just want to get some sense of where you are, where you are with your understanding of employee engagement. Right, don't worry about the answers being right or wrong. I just want you to think of something that resonates the most with you. We'll wait a couple more seconds for the poll to be over. Okay, I can see your responses coming in. That's amazing. I can see almost 50, 51 of you have put in your answers. That's amazing. Okay, let's give it another few seconds, guys. And then I'm just going to launch it so we see the results. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to end the polling now. And on your screen, you should have the results of what you chose. 98% of you said that employee engagement is about creating a culture conducive to productivity, loyalty, and happiness. Wow, what an amazing bunch of people you are. You are like well aware of what it is. So I'm really happy that you have that right. And trust me, along this conversation, we are going to do more to solidify your understanding of employee engagement. Let's get back into the conversation that we're having. So with our understanding that creating productive, committed and happy employees is the goal, it's like the hashtag goal that we have these days. Unfortunately, we alienate our personal experience from a professional experience, meaning that we think that employee engagement can be brought about just by doing something for our employees, that doing something could mean like providing a fancy office space, or could be a free meals, or could be fancy bean bags and all of these jazzy things, right? But we need to understand that that's perhaps not what it is. That may be a component of it, but that's not the entire story. So we have to define employee engagement. Now, spoiler alert, guys, there's not a single definition, but there are multiple definitions of employee engagement. But here's a common thread that runs amongst all, and it is this. It's the nature of the relationship between the organization and its employees, right? And if you get into the neuroscience piece, and you saw in my introduction that I am a neuromarketer, so I'm going to talk a bit about neuroscience. So the neuroscience piece talks about employee engagement in two ways. One is an emotional commitment. So what is an emotional commitment? Is feeling based. How do you feel about it, right? So think of questions like, do I feel safe in my job? Do I enjoy coming here? Do I feel celebrated? All of those factors. That's your emotional commitment to your job. The second one is more of a rational commitment, which is more thinking based. Things like when you think of things like, is this good for me? Am I going to get promoted this year? Is my salary at par with my peers? All of those questions fall into these buckets, and together they form the base of employee engagement. Now, there is another way to look at it, and this is like the more popular model of employee engagement, which is the Ian Hewitt's model of say, stay, and strive. Very quickly, we'll go through the three. So say is all about what the employees say about you. Now, saying is not just what they say about you within the four walls of your company, but also what they say outside. Importantly, in today's digital world, what they say on social media. So think of Glassdoor, think of LinkedIn. What are your employees talking of you? right? So the key drivers that can aid the say element in employee engagement is by ensuring that your talent is diverse, and then you give them equal opportunities for representing at the table and in different areas. The second element is stay. How long does an employee stay with you? Now, this is a factor of loyalty. How much will an employee really stay with you, even in the face of, let's say, salary hikes from a different company or a competition? And how you can ensure that your stay element is safeguarded is by giving them good career opportunities, ensuring that they have a career path that's carved out for them based on their aspirations and their goals, and very importantly, with rewards and recognitions. Because let's be very honest, we like being celebrated. We like people patting on our backs, and we like that kind of pride that comes along with that. The last element of the model is called strive, which means how much will your employees really strive to go above and beyond their KRAs and their OKRs to really deliver for you. And the way you can bring this about is by ensuring that the infrastructure and the ecosystem is conducive for the productivity, for the efficiency, and also the performance management. So you're able to map their competencies, you're able to close the skill gaps so they're able to advance in their career. So a summarization of what employee engagement really is, it's a lifelong commitment. It's a trust that is given and taken. It's a support that is shown, and also by having each other's back. So going back to the analogy that I started with, it is very akin to the engagement that we talk about in our personal lives. It's a two-way street and has to have a constant exchange. For the next bit, I would like to invite Raajit. Raajit is going to walk us through how the overall employee engagement paradigm has gone through a major change pre, during, and then post-COVID period so that we appreciate this better. Raajit, I'm over to you.
Thank you, Pranjalee. So sharing my screen just a bit. I have a short presentation prepared. So yeah, so first of all, I would like to start with the statement. This is the mantra that we live by, especially working for a product organization that is focused on building software solutions for helping organizations manage employee engagement. This is what we firmly believe in, and we always try to propagate this to all the HRs and all the customer POCs that we come across. Employees are the number one asset of any organization, and there are a lot of things that have changed. If you see, compared to let's say a couple of years back, what employee engagement meant. If we can take a look at what largely it used to be. So I'm talking as if there has been a lot of time that has passed since the beginning of the lockdown, but it has almost been exactly 1 year only. However, in that 1 year, we have seen a lot of behavioral and a lot of expectational changes as well from both employers and employees. How employees viewed engagement probably prior to lockdown. So it was a lot, the relationship was very transactional, I would say, between the employers and employees. It still is to a large extent, but the gap or the gap is being bridged very, very rapidly, I would say, through a lot of technological solutions. So as an employee, when I viewed engagement, what it means to me, what it pertains. So the first and the foremost thing that would come to my mind was employee perks and benefits. So what are all the additional things that my employer is providing to me apart from a good salary, a consistent salary? So these are things like health benefits, travel allowance, leave allowances, flexibility in terms of work-life balance, and so on. The other thing that most of the employees, and I'm talking about millennials largely, were interested in the kind of exit opportunities they would get from their employment with the current organization. So what kind of training supports and what kind of career development support they are going to get, what is the enhancement in their skill set also was a concern, albeit not the most primary one. Third was relationship with their team members, relationship at work, especially with their managers. We have seen quite a lot of studies, especially from Gallup, which says that the manager is the most important influencer in terms of engaging an employee. So, and finally, the team building activities, which are largely led by the HRs of the organization. So these are your weekend fun activities, get-togethers, off-sites, and so on. And this was largely what compassed employee engagement, at least from the point of view of an employee. And having worked in this industry for almost 4 to 5 years now, and having talked to a lot of HRs across organizations in terms of what their employees' outlook is towards their engagement programs, these are the kind of responses we typically get from an employee. Also, alternatively, how do we pull this up? How did employers viewed engagement? So this was about largely about what the HR organization of the employer could do or is planning to do for the employees. So again, this is very directly linked to a cost center of the HR organization of customers. And there are things like annual awards program, which companies run. Companies keep a track of the employee satisfaction levels. They want to promote a workplace culture which is very unique and very specific to them, and which gets largely propagated in a top-down structure. And the engagement is largely an HR objective. It is very rarely, it used to be a business objective. The HR team was largely concerned with improving employee engagement and focusing on people-related issues. And a lot of the times, a challenge that was faced by these HRs was how to measure the impact of whatever I'm doing, whatever the initiatives I'm taking for improving the employee morale and employee engagement at an organization. So there was a lot of gray area if we think about it, both from the point of view of the employee as well as the employers. This gap or this gray area, this scope of doubt is being bridged by the use of technology, especially after the lockdown. But as you can see, most of these parameters or paradigms were largely driven by the face time that I can get with a person at my workplace. But that has completely changed. So what has been the employee engagement outlook during the lockdown and probably after the lockdown? I think Pranjalee will take over that. So stopping my screen share. Yes, Pranjalee, over to you.
Oh, well, this is where Mugdha comes in. Mugdha, can you please get to the next? Thank you.
Yep, I'm going to take over. Thanks, Raajit and Pranjalee, for laying the groundwork for what employee engagement activity is. I'm just going to be quickly sharing my screen. So can you just let me know once you're able to see it, please? Okay, is that visible? Yeah.
Yes, Mugdha.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So hello, everybody. Thanks for taking out the time and attending this webinar today. So what I'm going to be talking about is the transition mode, the changing paradigm. So when COVID hit almost a year back, it was a massive change that struck all of us across the globe, across the continents. And it was something which was a change management that had to be done at a very, very big scale. But you know what? Change is the only thing that's constant. And I think we as human beings, we are so adaptable, we are so flexible. And it's just amazing the way all of us were able to, adjust and get adapted to this sort of a massive flux of a change that happened. But what happened was, suddenly there was this phygital mode that had to be turned on immediately. I'll tell you why. Now, phygital, again, is a very commonly used terminology these days. It's like a hybrid between the physical and the digital mode. So when this got turned on, now we had to ensure that all the Rangoli competitions we had to turn it into virtual Rangoli design competitions. Okay, that's a joke. That is not what only employee engagement consists of. And I'm so thankful to Raajit and Pranjalee that they have laid down the work and introduced what exactly is employee engagement. It's a whole spectrum of things. It starts from the first interaction that you have with either the recruiter or the HR or anybody. It could be someone you have interacted with on any of the social media sites to just get a heads up or, hey, you know what, I saw this vacancy. And how the person responds, it actually starts from there. That perception starts getting created from that itself. So that's how important it is to ensure that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, we need to understand that we always depict the employer, and employer branding is something which gets created along the way. So yes, this was something that happened. The phygital mode was suddenly switched on, and now all the activities had to be done online, right from the onboarding, the trainings that were happening, the learnings that used to happen. So the instructor-led trainings were now had to be taken virtually, and thank God that we had an LMS. So for us, it wasn't that much of an issue because we could transition very smoothly. But there was one challenge which was faced by HRs all across the globe, that was trying to now engage a workforce who was already in this mode of a massive change management. We were trying to get adjusted to this new normal of 100% remote working scenario. We had never done that. We might have had one or two odd couple of days which were assigned to us for work from home, but 100% remote working, that was something new. And now we have to get adjusted with having zero boundaries between our personal and our work lives. We couldn't separate that because now you're working from your home, your family is around you, and they had to get adjusted, you had to get adjusted. So there was a big change that happened. Sometimes when I sit back and wonder, I think that the sort of massiveness of change that all of us have undergone, no matter who you are, where are you watching this from, it's a big deal. And the worst of them all is, even till date, now with the second wave that is hitting, there's a 24/7 anxiety of living in this pandemic, wherein you're just praying daily, whether hoping that you and your family members will make out to the other side safely. It's a big deal. And now we had to get employee engagement into the picture. So for HRs, trust me, it was a big deal, because right from having the interviews, having the virtual onboarding, everything had to be put into the phygital mode. So yes, it was a challenge, but I think we have aced it in the right manner. We have gone for it with the right spirit, with the right motivation. And like what I said, we as human beings, we are very flexible, no matter which role that we take up. So that's something which we have really lived up to. Yes, and there is some good news as well. So I was recently studying, reading about this study from McKinsey, which spoke about now that the workforce has gone online, 80% of the workforce still feels engaged. So that's a good news. Okay, 80% is a big deal. And why is that? Is because most of the organizations, they address the one fact which was going on in everyone's head, and which was the topmost priority. That was the focus on wellness. So what the organizations did was they were there with the employees, and they were like a helping hand to them with something that they needed the most help with right now that we are living in a pandemic. And that was what helped us ensure that we were able to at least reach that 80% number. So that's a good news, by the way. And another thing which has come out to be like a common emerging success theme for organizations who were able to transition smoothly is, there were three things they really focused a lot on and focused it from their heart. One of them is being compassionate, being empathetic, and instilling that sense of trust within your employees. So it's just as simple as that. The moment you break the barriers and remove yourself from that professional shell and try to understand that you are a human being and the person in front is also just a human being going through what you're going through, just empathize with them, just be there for them, hear them out. Trust me, that does wonders. If you're able to get that right, everything else, as per whatever you have studied, will fall into place, is what is my personal opinion on this. Okay, but let's not, try to overlook this fact, which is something which has been thrown at our face. One of the biggest challenges that we faced is the missing human factor, because the entire workforce has gone virtual. So that face-to-face, those face-to-face interactions, those water cooler conversations, they have just zeroed out. And that's something which is definitely a negative point, which all of us are completely aware about. Why? Because it goes way back to our primate ancestors. So there was this very interesting article I was reading recently. So our primate ancestors, they had started hunting in a night mode earlier. So when they started hunting, it used to happen in the night because they had the shield of the darkness. But what happened is eventually they stopped doing that and they moved to hunting during the daytime, just so that they could have the socialization. They could socialize with the other human beings around. They could have that sort of a culture. They could grow as a tribe. That's how they made the switch, even though they knew that this is going to be a disadvantage, because now they wouldn't have the darkness as a shield or as a plus point for them. That's how inbuilt socialization in us, it goes way, way, way back. And so now what has happened is, due to this whole work from home scenario, that socialization is definitely missing. And the limitations is so there are a lot of limitations also when it comes to conducting online activities. For me personally, if you ask me, I think the worst feature is having that mute button and that cross on the video, because whenever we have employee engagement activities, it feels like you're talking to the thumbnails of the employees. I mean, you don't know whether he is there, his dog is watching, or her, I don't know who's there, who's watching the activity. It's a definite down off. But again, I do understand and empathize that not everybody is comfortable in sharing their personal lives. Not everybody has the liberty to have their own corner or nook where they can have those the video calls with no disturbance. So that's there and understandable. But again, that is a big drawback. And so what happens is that the human factor is a lot missing, because even if you're asking questions, you have to really nudge people to unmute and answer to what you're trying to address. And that whole crux somehow is just lost, honestly, to a certain limit. But technology has been such a good friend for all of us HRs, because now there are so many good softwares and products that are there in the market, which really help us ace this, even though there are some sort of constraints to it. Okay, so this is where I end my bit, and I think Pranjalee, I would request you to take over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Well, it's not me, Raajit, it's for you.
Oh, it's
to speak about the myths of an engaged employee, if you can. Thank you.
Okay, 1 second. I'm just stuck. Right. Yes, Raajit, over to you, please.
So a good example here, I started speaking without unmuting myself. Right. So thank you, Mugdha. And as Mugdha listed out, there's been a lot of change with respect to what are the objectives of the HRs, what are the expectations from the employees, as well as the employers. And HRs, they sort of need to act on behalf of the employers, to take care of the people. And because of the whole virtual setting, the whole work from home or the remote work setting, it has given it has given the HRs a new list of challenges to tackle in terms of effectively engaging with the employees. So previously, we had the convenience of FaceTime with people. So it was not very difficult to reach out to people, to know exactly what they're doing while they are working, to know what is their outlook towards their organization, to keep a pulse on their sentiments, on their engagement levels, on their satisfaction levels, and so on. But that feedback loop, that continuous feedback loop, has taken a serious hit during the work from home situation, because the HRs, just like us, are sitting at their homes and looking at a computer screen after all. They're not really engaging with the employees, which is what they're supposed to do. So the new challenges, the new kind of challenges for the HRs are primarily along developing a sustainable framework for motivating the employees by themselves, as in for self-motivation of the employees. The HRs may not be able to proactively address each and every employee issues that crop up every now and then, like how it used to happen in an office environment. But yeah, the distance and the access to technology has mandated that people are aligned with the organizational goals and vision, uh, simply so as to be engaged themselves. It is not possible for managers to interact with their direct reportees on a daily basis sometimes. And in those situations, it is very important that the employees, the team leader, manager, and the organization have a very streamlined vision and a very focused approach to achieving whatever goal that they have in mind. Another issue is the lack of physiological safety that people feel during a situation like the COVID lockdown. A lot of people uh, are losing their jobs. A lot of people are finding trouble, finding you know comfortable places to live in, access to healthcare, access to the necessary medical care, and so on. And it is during these times that employees typically look up to an HR to help them mitigate some of these issues, especially people joining companies newly from different locations. The initially, while in the period of settling down in a new company, it is the HRs who are the go-to person for most of the employees. And building trust in the leadership is equally important now, simply because if I'm not trusting my organization to take the right calls during the lockdown, then I feel that the organization is putting me in a spot of literally physical danger, or putting my health at risk, which is not at all acceptable to, I think, anyone. And finally, as I spoke earlier, a framework for self-motivation. As in the HR, we need to understand that the HRs may not be able to proactively solve each and every issue. So it is on us to take actions ourselves. Yeah, and just when the lockdown happened, right? So now we see a lot of technology companies coming up with a lot of sophisticated and curated solutions for helping HRs tackle these problems, but there was none at that time. So the HRs really faced a paradigm shift in terms of what was expected out of them. Uh, yeah, so that is it about what was the transformational change in in HR practices. I think the next section is seeing what an engaged employee looks like. So,
Yes.
right. Please excuse me. I think there's some network issue at my end. Uh, yeah. So we need to identify what an engaged employee persona looks like. We have an understanding of the definition of an engaged employee before the COVID lockdown. But now, what is the expectation of an HR from an employee who is producing good results, who is producing consistent results, who is showing a lot of leadership traits? What does an engaged employee look like? So coming to that topic. So first of all, we would like to debunk some myths around what an engaged employee is. We often think that a happy employee is an engaged employee, which is not necessarily true. As we saw earlier when Pranjalee presented, the definition of an engaged employee is someone who is focused at his work, who is highly productive, who believes in the organization's goals and vision, and goes out of his or her way to contribute to those strategic objectives. So a happy employee is not necessarily an engaged employee. The second point is a lot of times when the organization is not really able to make a cultural impact or drive a behavioral change in terms of culture across the organization. So to mitigate this issue, the tool that is most often used is providing extra monetary benefits to the employees, which again is not really a direct replacement for a culturally, aligned workplace, for a culturally aligned employee. Of course, monetary component and the monetary benefit does impact the level of engagement, but only to a very certain level. Then we have a notion that the millennials are very difficult to engage effectively. As of today, if you look at a typical organization, almost half of the workforce is typically millennials. So they form the crux of the organization in terms of both talent, skill, and strategic outlook. But the millennials are very focused on what they want from an employer. We have a lot of studies from Gallup and other organizations which support that training and development and effective training is one of the biggest, influencers when it comes to millennials engagement. And that is where an organization like Upside LMS really comes into the picture. And finally, we always talk about employee turnaround. In fact, I also saw a question that came up earlier, which was talking about how to influence employee turnaround through engagement. So we have this notion that employee retention is the ultimate goal of engagement, which is not really true. An engaged employee is not just someone who stays with an organization for a long period of time, but someone who, as I said earlier, is contributing significantly to the organization's growth and strategic objectives. So this employee feels that the organization is a part of is an important part of their life. Their work is an important part of their life, and they would like to see their contributions turn out in a meaningful way. So a highly productive and an employee who really takes on a lot of leadership initiatives is probably more closer to an ideal engaged employee persona than someone who simply stays with an organization for a long period of time. So these are some of the biggest probably myths around who an engaged employee is. Next, we will talk about what are the characteristics of an engaged employee. And I think Mugdha will take care of that. So over to you, Mugdha. I'm stopping my screen share.
Sure. Thanks, Raajit. Okay, I'm going to be sharing my screen again. Just a minute. Okay. All right, so now let's have a look at what exactly do you mean by an engaged employee? What are the characteristics? Because you can't go around the company and try to spot, okay, he's engaged, she's not engaged, he's engaged. There has to be some sort of a logic behind it. So let's try to see what are the parameters which might help us make some sense. The first and foremost is any engaged employee is very enthusiastic about his or her work, their workplace, what's happening at their workplace. They love to know about what's happening, what are the current news. That's something which is a part of them, so they're highly enthusiastic. Second is they are highly inspired, and inspiration is not something that is coming from just inside them. It's because they have a whole tribe who's there to just give a pat on their back, have an attitude of gratitude. When you have such sort of a culture that is there in an organization, when you have leaders who are shown the importance of having such sort of a culture, it percolates down to the lower levels as well. It percolates down to the fresher who has just come into the corporate world trying to make it big. So if you are able to really inspire that person, then it is something that it's something that you're doing right. So an engaged employee is also someone who is very inspired. So once they are inspired, then they feel empowered. They feel empowered to work in an autonomous mode. They want to do new things. They want to come up with new ideas. They're not afraid of sharing new ideas. They want to have those open conversations with their managers, with the HR, anybody whom they feel is approachable, who might help them in making that idea into a reality. So they are very empowered, very self-motivated, and very confident from inside. So yes, so eventually what happens is they are highly self-confident, and when there is an individual who is enthusiastic, inspired, empowered, and confident, that's a sure shot success for him or her achieving excellence. So they are definitely someone who will be in the spectrum of being, excellent employees. Those are the characteristics of an engaged employee. All right, just a quick example. So, all right, before I go to the example, let me tell you that this is a hypothetical example. Let's not get into the genders of it because it's just hypothetical, okay? So please don't come and break my neck for it. So anyway, so coming to the example, so we have Mr. Enthu. So meet Mr. Enthu, and we have Miss Na. All right. So what is Mr. Rentu? How do you know that he's Mr. Rentu? He's someone who's proactive. He loves to motivate others. He enjoys his job. He communicates well. He accepts his mistakes. He loves to collaborate with other teams, and he's not afraid to ask for help. Because why is he not afraid to ask for help is because that barrier has been broken. He has been instilled that confidence that yes, we are here for you, we're here to hear you out. Those are the things which will help you identify an engaged employee. And Miss Na is someone who is pushed to work. She complains about work. Arey, आज तो कॉफी में तो कॉफी नहीं था. She's someone who wants to change her job. She wants to avoid communication. No, you know what, I'm just going to be in my silo and I'm just going to work myself. She's someone who loves blaming others. Yeah, it's just because this team didn't do this, इसलिए मेरा काम नहीं हुआ. Otherwise, I am too perfect. She loves to work alone and she doesn't like to ask any questions because she's gone into that silo. It's not, again, I'm not saying whose fault is it. The fault is lies in both of them. It's not just the employer trying to engage the employees. They should be receptible also. If someone has gone into that silo, it's very difficult to break it, but there are definitely ways that the employers can do to help them come to the other side of the bridge. So that's just a quick comparison between an engaged and a disengaged employee. Okay, and so what should the goal be for most of the HRs? All of us think that, our goal is that all the employees, 100% of them should be engaged. That's the ultimate goal. But you know what, while it's a very, it is a realistic goal, but I would still say it's not that realistic. Why? Because there will always be that one person who would have his or her thinking, the way he wants things to happen at the workplace. And you can't make everybody happy at the end of the day. Like, HRs, we are not magicians. We can't just go around waving, hey, you know what, here you go, so you're happy, you're happy. That can't happen. There are ways where we can ensure that we can reach to a certain number of percentage, ensuring that the whole workplace also speaks the same language. But yeah, the ultimate realistic goal should be that around, say, 99.9% of the employees should be engaged. Okay, employee engagement for the new normal. Okay, just a second. Pranjalee, I'm next, right? This is the next session I have to take up. All right, cool. So sorry, we are just bouncing between three of us. But thanks. All right, so now let's have a look at what does the workforce engagement look like in 2021 and beyond. Okay, last 1 year has been something which has just changed everything, our whole perception about how things should be. So what HRs need to do is we really need to come down to the basics and trust our gut. We need to literally walk in the employee's shoes, not just from an HR department perspective, but think of yourself as a developer. Think of someone who has started his or her work coding in front of the system and who's going on for long hours without any breaks. What is it that he or she would really need? Try to put those things down and try to understand how is it that you can help him feel better and feel more engaged at work. The one thing that has come up and which 2020 has taught all of us is that flexible style of working definitely works. Now, forget flexible, here we are 100% remote working, we are working virtually, and still the productivity levels haven't dipped. If you go to LinkedIn these days, just a quick example before I go to the next point. If you go to LinkedIn these days, you will see a lot of surveys and polls being conducted wherein they ask, what style of working do you like? 100% work from home, you can do a thumbs up, or else celebrate if it's 100% going to office, or a flexible style, then you give a heart. Most of them will end up giving a heart. Why? Because they would want to have that balance. That's something they've got a taste of. They know that it's a myth that only going to office and working, that's the only way things can happen. That's not how it is. You can be at home, you can have a work-life balance. It is definitely there, and this is something which employees are definitely going to ask for in the coming years, and we have to be ready. We as employers, we as HRs have to be ready to be able to give that sort of a work-life balance, and which is definitely achievable. All right. So the role of L&D and skilling and employee engagement, this is where I asked Pranjalee to take over. And I'm just going to quickly stop sharing my screen. Just a second. Okay, over to you, Pranjalee.
Okay, I'm just quickly moving through. Thanks, Mugdha. So guys, so far we have understood what employee engagement is, what an engaged employee looks like and does not look like, and what 2021 looks like in terms of employee engagement. So the only question that needs to be answered, which I think is of paramount importance for us today, especially because we have gathered here to understand just that, is what will play a key role in bringing this about. I'm just looking at my clock and I'm very mindful of the fact that we have only 10 minutes, so I'm quickly just going to try to rush through. But before that, I want to quickly talk about this one thing that I find utterly fascinating. So there is a term in the Bible and it says that may your cup runneth over. Now, what this really means in the context of employee engagement is any employee who is so fulfilled with her work, with her workplace, with her workmates, that her passion, her ability to cooperate and everything that Mugdha said as a part of what an engaged employee is, it just spills over in all areas of her work and life. Now, the bigger question I think that begs an answer is how do you create employees whose cup runneth over? The simple answer to this is employee learning and development. Raajit touched upon this when he said that training and development, as per many studies, Gallup is one, pointed that training and development plays a key role in bringing about overall engagement. However, the road between L&D and employee engagement is not as straightforward, because there are so many intangible components. It's very difficult to draw a linear line that says this equals to this. So let's try to quantify the intangibles by looking at some data. Now, here's one. It says that 1 in 3 people leave the organization within the first 1 year itself, right? And this is close to 33% of people, and these are voluntary or involuntary. And if you think that's staggering enough, consider this. 22% of employees leave their job within the first 6 weeks, which is less than 2 months of joining. So that's the new employee story. Let's look at the employee retention piece. 1 in 4 workers leave their jobs every year. And interestingly, what is not captured here, but is a part of the same research, 77% of this actually can be prevented by organizations, right? So if you dig deep into both of these, the first story that we heard about from a new employee perspective tells us that there's a need for early employee onboarding. Early employee onboarding, is all about inducting and orienting the employee towards your processes, the policies to follow, what the company culture is about, his role, expectations, so far and so forth. The second one points to a lack of development opportunities, because quite honestly, millennials was one example Raajit gave where millennials need a sense of purpose, and for that they need that upskilling and training to be there. But needless to say, across all the different generations that are there, we all need development opportunities. So together, the underlying theme for both cases is employee learning and development. Now, while it's important now to understand that there is a link between the two, L&D and employee engagement, we also need to understand who can bring it about and what can we do so that we can facilitate employee engagement. I want to quickly get into a thinkitation, and I want to explain what thinkitation is. How many of you are aware of meditation? I just want all of you to use the raise hand feature, and very quickly, just by show of hands, tell me, okay, we have so many participants, very good. We have impressed, it's a great lot of people who also understand meditation. Okay, so let me explain what thinkitation is. We're not going to take too much time, but I want you to think of the person who has made you feel special in your current job or your previous job, going back to the emotional commitment and the rational commitment piece. Just think of that person. I'm sure that the names or the faces of some people will pop up that have either made that sense of pride or sense of comfort in your mind. Right? So these are the people that you need to think about. And why are we doing this? You'll understand in the next 3 slides. So essentially what we are looking at are different people which will help you enable employee engagement, right? And the first lot I want to talk about is the leadership and management. See, leadership and management is the topmost hierarchy in any organization, and they have a bunch of roles that they play. But the key ones that aid employee engagement is one, by culture setting. And culture setting is even critical because we are working in a virtual world where we no longer report to a physical office or even see our colleagues in flesh. So everything that happens is really by understanding of information that's disseminated by the leadership and management. And if that is communicated in a way that is understood by everyone, that is one step done correctly for your employee engagement. Now, if you have a culture that is leaning more towards learning, formalizing training and development plans becomes even more critical, because you need to show your employees that it is a real priority for you to ensure that learning and development happens as a part of the everyday activity. It's not just important to provide the learning, it's equally important to give recognition. Why recognition? Now, there is a nice story that says that, sorry, it's not a story, it's a proverb that says that you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. As a matter of fact, in this story, I want to say that you don't just have to lead the horse to the water, you have to make it so thirsty that it goes to the water and drinks the water itself. That is where recognition comes in play, that the employee feels like he or she wants to take up the learning. The next is getting feedback, because it has to be a two-way street. You can't just work in a black box where everything is just pushed onto the employees and left onto them to decide what is good for them or not. And the last is promoting from within. Now, we're working in a gig economy, right, where the talent pool has just massively increased. There are no more barriers, even regional barriers. But it's important to ensure that your employees that have been working with you have career development opportunities. So after you have spotted the hippos, the high-performing individuals in your team, give them career advancement so that they feel more committed to your brand and they stick around for longer. The second bucket I want to quickly touch upon is the human resources and how they can aid employee engagement is by creating different learning interventions that talk of the policies and the processes that we spoke about. Because unless and until I understand how I can comply with the organization or the compliance training parameter too, I can do little to really work as per the rules. Second is making sure that learning is available. Now, I want to also say this as a caveat. Just putting a plethora of learning in front of the learners and expecting them to take it up themselves is not going to be fair. You have to align it to their goals and aspirations, of course, in conjunction with your organization goals, something that Raajit also touched upon earlier. Last but not the least, you have to make learning actionable and applicable. Now, here's the thing, right? If you learn something, your brain goes to task and it starts forming new neurons. Unfortunately, the neurons wither away if you don't keep reinforcing that knowledge. They wither away faster if you don't really do an action around it. So which is why doing something, implementing the newly acquired knowledge is equally important. The last piece is a line manager. And something that I heard Raajit speak again earlier is most of our times in our day, just imagine this was your day to day, I'm sure you spoke to your line manager more than you did to any of your colleagues because you had to, let's say, report to him or her, you had to take the briefing for a task, you had to do a debriefing, whatever it looked like. So how we can sensitize line managers so that they're able to empathize the element that Mugdha spoke about earlier is through behavioral training, through performance training, so they're able to talk to the teams and understand in a setup where they can no longer look at the body language and gauge what mindset their colleagues and the teammates are in, but rather read between the lines and empathize with them better. Also encouraging social learning and knowledge collaboration. We know that humans are social creatures. Mugdha spoke about this earlier. How can you create virtual water cooler moments so that your employees can still share ideas, learn from each other in a very contained setup so that the knowledge transfer happens seamlessly. Now, the essence of everything we spoke about is just this. Employee engagement really contributes to happiness. And this is not just me saying, there are multiple researchers that do this. But the way to do this is by leveraging learning technology, because it's one thing to talk of all the things and who can do it, but it's a whole different ballgame to make something as an enabler. Now, there's a lot of talk, about putting the responsibility and transferring the responsibility of learning to learners. And there is, you hear people say, put learners in the driver's seat, give them the ownership of the learning journey. But unless they have the access to the right tools and technologies, it's not going to happen. So you have to ensure that the tools and technologies that you have as a part of your L&D, they can be embedded in the flow of work so that you're not exerting your already fatigued learners who are, desperately looking at some time out from the digital settings. But the learning is so deeply embedded in their overall day life that they seamlessly go through it. Now, very quickly, here's not a very exhaustive list of what you can do, but here's a quick look at the low-hanging fruits that you can do as a part of your L&D to start off employee engagement. On the left is digital learning content. It could be anything from SCORM videos to micro-learning videos. And this is going to be that fuel in your car that really allows you to go from point A to point B, and something that your learners can consume and be skilled on. On the right, you see a learning platform. Learning platforms could be anything from a learning management system, an LMS, or learning experience platforms, LXP. But in a sense, it is just a learning platform, which is a delivery vehicle for you to ensure the learning reaches to the learners and meets the learners where they are. The learning platforms available today have a breadth of features. They have everything from mobile apps, so they're anywhere, anytime learning can happen seamlessly. Social learning, we spoke about that earlier. There's also AI-based recommendations. Think of Netflix, when you consume content, it shows you recommendations based on your likes and dislikes. And finally, gamification. Because let's be very honest, we like being competitive. We like to outdo others, and we like to feel a sense of pride. And when you have gamification coupled with rewards and recognition, it's just a potent combination because we like being recognized, as I said earlier. A quick neuroscience piece before Raajit explains on the R&R a bit further is every time that we have recognition, it could be in any form or shape. It could be a real pat on the back. It could be a praise from your manager. It could be an award sitting on your desk. It could be a voucher that just reaches your inbox. Your brain releases a neurotransmitter called as dopamine. Now, dopamine is a reward chemical, and every time it is released, you have the sense of fulfillment and joy. And just the way the smoker has the rush when he smokes or she smokes, and you get the rush and the high from the alcohol, it's the same story, only in a very positive way. So with that, I think it's only right to understand how R&R works in conjunction with L&D. Yes, Rajiv.
Thanks, Pranjalee. Pranjalee talked about the role of L&D in employee engagement and the role of learning technologies today that HRs can utilize and leverage to promote certain tenets of employee engagement. What I'm going to talk about right now quickly is an overall approach probably that the HRs can use while addressing employee engagement related issues. So we are saying that the HRs should start with the employee pulse, getting the employee feedback, because the whole exercise is meant for the betterment of employees, their sense of well-being and their perception of well-being, which is offered from their employers. So starting with an employee feedback survey, an employee pulse survey or an ENPS survey, something that does not really create an inertia in terms of responding or giving your answer to, but at the same time, it very quickly and effectively captures the overall sentiment of the workforce that the HRs can further diagnose and deep dive into. So, these are some of the biggest contributors in terms of parameters to the overall engagement metrics that most of our customer organizations actually use. So we see that the relationships at your workplace, the relationships that you have with your colleagues, with your managers, as Pranjalee just talked about, and as well as the hygiene factors. So what comprises the hygiene factors is mainly components, let's say, from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Your need to have physiological safety, your need to have a financial security, your need to have your self-esteem from your work, and how these things that you closely feel as a person are linked to the work that you do. Those are also very important contributors to the overall engagement metrics, and these are certain areas that we typically promote our customer organizations to focus on while improving employee engagement. So after getting the feedback from the employees, after getting to know the pulse of the workforce and taking a deep dive into how to diagnose certain issues or how to continue something that the HRs have been doing right, this is the framework again that we follow across organizations. We want the HRs to be able to connect people on information or critical information throughout the organization. We want the HRs to be able to empower their people by giving them a voice in organizational matters. Typically, this happens through feedback loops. Then we want the HRs to be able to motivate people without even meeting them, which requires a whole lot of activities around building your organization culture and re-emphasizing the organization culture at multiple touch points with your employees. And finally, in the long term, the objective is to align the employee to a common set of shared vision and purpose and goals, so that there's no wastage in terms of time and effort. All the employees work in a very synergetic manner and contribute directly towards the organization growth. Why we are saying this is simply because we have a very good amount of data to back this kind of an approach, starting from the employees getting their feedback and then building towards solutioning for the issues that have come up from these interactions with the employees. So as you can see, these are some of the key business metrics that we see get impacted uh, as long as the HRs place the employees at the middle of their designing their engagement programs. Finally, we are going to talk about the best practices. I'm sorry. The best practices for employee engagement. And over to you, Mugdha.
Sure. Thanks, Raajit. Guys, I know we have already overshot by 4 minutes, so I'm just going to try to keep this as crisp as possible. Before I do that, let me just share my screen. Okay, is the screen visible?
It's not, Mugdha.
Oh, it's not? Oh my God, hold on. Okay. How about now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. So we've come to the last part of today's webinar, wherein we will try to, figure out what are the best practices for engaging employees in the new normal. So from my side, what I believe in is there are 4 points which will really contribute to having the best practices for the employee engagement activities in the new normal. First and foremost is all of us, as in the entire HR fraternity, will have to go back and literally revisit the HR policies that are there and try to restructure them, which will speak the same language as the new normal. So we will need to have a lot of flexible style of working policies, which might not have been a part of our policy structure earlier. Another things which we would really need to focus on is to ensure that we speak a language that speaks about diversity and inclusion, because every individual on this planet is unique the way they are, and they need to feel included. They have the right to feel included, and it's time we make that change. It is definitely there in our hands, and we should definitely look to it to ensuring that everybody feels welcome, no matter who they are, no matter where they are from. That's another thing. So a lot of such HR policies which might be a lot of age old, because now honestly we the HR function isn't limited to just running the payroll and just taking care of the attendance. We've got way beyond that and beyond from that. The spectrum has really increased, and also what COVID did was the management, they literally came up to us and they started asking for our advice that what, this has happened, the workforce has gone remote, what do you think it is that we should be doing? So let's leverage that and let's try to revisit the HR policies which might be redundant and try to come up with something new that would be the new thing. Another aspect is we need to really leverage the beauty of AI and ML, and an LMS is something which is a definite must have. An LMS is something which we recently launched in our organization also, and the change has been massive. The sort of engagement percentage that increased, and I know someone has just asked me, how can we measure the engagement percentage? You need to conduct more surveys in order to be able to help you understand whether what you're doing is actually working or not. And not just surveys, you can have like random checks with the employees as well to see what's working and what's not working. But an LMS is something which will help you seamlessly integrate the learning of the individuals, which is their personal goals, and it would be something which will be beneficial to them to develop themselves. And not just themselves, what you're doing is you're creating an individual who is upskilled, which will eventually help your organization reach its goals as well. That's the beauty of an LMS, and trust me, I have really experienced this myself. Something whosoever is from the HR fraternity, something you need to really have a look at. Third point, which I think is something which COVID really opened our eyes, was in terms of having wellness at the workplace. We need to prioritize this for our employees a lot, and this is something which will also stay. What happens is when you are able to have that sort of a confidence in your employees, that we are not just here just in order to ensure that the work is done, we are also here to hear you out and to see how do we help you achieve your personal goals as well. So wellness is something which really needs to be targeted at. And we at Upside LMS, we really focus a lot on wellness. And recently we were awarded with the winners of the leading practices in employee health and well-being also. That's how much of a focus we really had for the wellness of our employees. And it has the results that we got, the sort of feedback that we received was tremendous, because the employees were ecstatic by the fact that one thing that was going on in their minds, we were able to help them make some sense around it. So wellness at the workplace is also something we need to focus on. Last is something which I truly believe in, is we really need to bring back the humanness in HR. Now, I know, again, this is a terminology which you might have heard a lot. What it means is just be there for your employees, just sit with them, try to listen to what they have to say, try to empathize to what they are going through, try to understand that even though they have their personal lives, that somehow the mood is going to percolate down into their professional behavior as well. I know that we try to always, try to say that keep your professional life and personal life aside, but guys, we're human beings. So at the end of the day, that's very difficult. Our emotions are always something which are going on in our head. We can't keep our emotions aside, right? So yes, empathize, just be there. One thing which I personally have done wherever I have worked is to just sit and listen to what the employees have to say. Don't say anything, don't give them any gyan. Just sit there and listen to what they have to say, hear them out, and it does wonders. So that's something which we really need to focus on, try to bring back the humanness in the HR. So yes, that's about it. I think we have reached to the end of today's webinar. We have overshot time, but nevertheless, I think this has been a beautiful webinar, very insightful, and thank you for everybody who's been a part of it. We've had a very engaging audience as well. So we've got some question and answers as well, which I think Naz is going to bring up for us.
Yes, yes, we do have some questions.
Sure.
So I can see that Pranjalee has answered most of the guys have answered. So they are saying, despite we organize various events for employees around health and wellness, team building, festival celebrations, still the turnaround from the employees is really less. So how can we make sure that the employees also equally participate and for the HR initiative?
So I'll go for this because I've answered it already, but just for everyone to know, see, here's the thing, right? Digital fatigue is a real thing. So when we plan any kind of activity, just consider that. Also think of how can you make it a mix, and that empathetic factor that we have been talking about is for a reason. You really need to understand that the employees are trying to mix in everything. So it's a mixed bag of things that we're all working on. So my 2 cents will be to ensure that you have learner fatigue taken care of. So just try to stagger your programs in a way that don't burden the employees, because our plate's already full, quite honestly. See how you can make it a good mix and something that aligns to your employees. So, one way is to see what aspirations they have. It could be a persona study that you do similar to what we do in marketing. Talking from a marketing perspective, we have a buyer persona. You can have an employee persona. Just make a list of things that you think work for them and try to align activities that work in their favor. Of course, keep the organization goals in mind as you do that. That's my 2 cents on it.
Thanks, Pranjalee. There's one more with from the, I'm just reading it aloud so that everybody can get a fair idea. Is there any measure, benchmark you're aware of that calculates the impact of employee engagement? What metrics do the HR track? Mugdha, since you've already answered, you can answer.
Yes, I've already answered that. So Ashish, what I think is surveys are your best friend. Keep conducting regular surveys so that you can capture the effectiveness of employee engagement. And as what Raajit mentioned, what Impulse has is you can run weekly surveys as well, just to understand the pulse of the employees, to get an understanding as to how their mood is. So that's something which will really help you understand and sort of, understand the impact of employee engagement. Also have a sort of an open conversation with your employees. Like I said, just sit and listen to what they have to say. Trust me, it does wonders.
And then thanks, and how to get started with L&D strategy for an organization. I think Pranjalee's answered that.
So, I'm seeing people ask what these abbreviations stand for. So I want to be very clear. L&D is learning and development. So the low-hanging fruits in doing any learning and development is actually to start inward. Try to understand what do you want to achieve. For example, when we transitioned in COVID from a physical to then a phygital and then a digital kind of environment, digital training became like the key parameter for everyone to have done for the employees so that they could even remain in business, forget about growing. So if you have to start inward, start identifying what are the key objectives for you. Are there any challenges that you see that you can probably fulfill with some kind of training? And then you have to identify competencies. So competencies in this case that I gave you, the example, the digital skilling is a competency. So that becomes your skill that you need to now find a solution to. And thereafter, you go and get a learning platform, and then you have the digital learning content. The content could be, again, multiple types. I had a list on it, but this is my quick fix on what you can do with regards to starting off with your L&D strategy.
Thanks, Pranjalee. I think I would go with this last question. An interesting question, of course. What about us, HR? We need to be engaged as well.
You know what? I think I I should answer that. Absolutely, a very valid question. I again empathize with what you're saying. But again, if you're someone like me, I find happiness when my employees are happy. So the engagement happens any which way. So if I'm able to ensure that my tribe is happy, I'm able to do some sort of a productive contribution to their value in any small way. That in itself will ensure that I am engaged. So maybe you can try it out, why not just have a look at it.
Raajit, what do you have to say? I'm just curious to hear you. You're a product manager. I'm sure this comes to your mind when you think of the product roadmap.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the product that we build are for the HRs to engage the HRs. So we are sitting a little bit upstream, I would say, in the entire value chain where we engage the HRs. And as Mugdha correctly pointed out, the best way to engage the HRs is to provide them with compelling solutions and to provide them with the appropriate resources and equipments to help them mitigate employee issues very proactively. I think that's the thing that HRs appreciate the most about us, the proactiveness with which the technology solutions deals with employees' issues and helps them get a tangible outcome as well. So yeah, I think it's one of the caveats of being an HR. The people's sentiments and their motivation levels are sort of your responsibility. So your happiness and your engagement is indirectly linked to theirs. Yeah, I totally agree with Mugdha.
Thank you, Raajit. Yeah, certainly. I think when you speak about culture or when you speak about engagement, it's just not an HR activity, but each and every member in the organization should be a part of it and collaborate to working towards that. So that's all. And I think we can wind up the session. And thank you, guys. Of course, employee engagement is a very, very vast topic that cannot be covered in a 1 hour's time, but you guys definitely give your best sense. And thank you to this lovely audience who was constantly active with these questions. And yes, have a great evening, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Raz, and thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Stay
guys.
home.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Good.